But maybe I can just say a little bit more about the Progressive Alliance issue that I know Keith touched on earlier and is a central part of the co-leadership bid that Jonathan and I are making. And I guess I wanted to say that that I know for people who've been around the party for a long time, the whole issue of electoral reform has been one that we've been banging on about for years, and many of you may well feel quite weary about it and thinking, well, what's different now from the times that we've been talking about this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And I just want to say that I do just get the sense that things are looking a little bit more positive now. And for example, I think what is different is that more and more people in the Labour Party are recognising that whoever their leader is, they are not going to be able to win an outright majority at the next election. I think you only need to look at what's happened with the SNP in Scotland to realise that it's going to be enormously difficult for Labour to win on their own. If you add to that the fact that this government is planning to bring in fewer MPs, so basically they're going to redraw the constituency boundaries to reduce the number of MPs from 650 to 600, and you can be sure that the way in which they redraw those boundaries will be in a way that is helpful to the Conservative Party, and it's been estimated that Labour will lose 30 or 40 seats simply as a result of that boundary redrawing. So I think the fact that people like Chuka Umunna, from pretty much the centre of the party in a sense, is with Jonathan Reynolds setting up an all-party group on electoral reform, I think that's a really interesting signal. The fact that John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, has made a very public U-turn on his position on electoral reform and is now in favour of it. Jeremy has said that as long as it maintains some kind of constituency link, and obviously there are various different forms of electoral reform, but as long as it's got one with a constituency link, then he would be in favour of that. The unions are changing their view on it. It feels to me that there are quite a lot of straws in the wind, that people are now looking at this as a possibility who even a few years ago would not have done. There was an amazing meeting in London on Tuesday with over 1,000 people that Compass organised to talk about the idea of a progressive alliance, what that might look like, and there's just a real energy behind the idea. And in terms of what it might look like, I mean, it could take a million different forms. It could be just that we look at some marginal seats, we have a discussion with local parties in those areas where perhaps it will only be a question of that the other parties might not fight it so hard, that we don't actually necessarily even stand candidates down. That's at one end of the spectrum, right through to the idea of having open primaries, and something that Paul Mason, the Guardian journalist, suggested in an article in the Guardian just after the election, was the idea that in order to fight off the kind of Brexit max, if you like, the kind of Andrew Leadsom version of Brexit, you could imagine if there were an early general election, then perhaps you would have a progressive candidate in constituencies where you were up against that kind of more extreme form of Brexit, and you could have open primaries, and you would have one candidate who would get all the support behind them to fight against that kind of incumbent MP. So those are some of the ideas, but I guess I would just end by saying that for me, what's interesting about a progressive alliance is not just that it's an electoral pact for proportional representation, which frankly, if you go to most people in the public, that isn't going to inspire them. It sounds like another, political party stitch-up. Whatever happens, I'm really sure that it's got to be bottom-up, it's got to be grassroots-led, it's got to be in the hands of local parties from all the parties to make the decisions about this. It's not something that could possibly be sorted out behind closed doors by people in secret. This has got to be something that is talked about and debated, and people will have very many different views, I'm sure. But I guess I would simply close by saying that I joined the party 30 years ago, and if someone had said to me, for all of the work we've put in, that 30 years later, we've got 3 amazing MEPs, we've got some wonderful councillors, we've got 1 MP, but we deserve more than that. Over 1 million people voted Green, even under this hideous electoral system, knowing that their vote might not translate into a seat. I believe, that we really can be a party of government, and I think we need to have that kind of ambition. We know that in order to be able to grasp that opportunity, we might need to do something quite extraordinary in the next few months, and I just hope that we're up for doing that. Thank you.